The scene is chilling. A pastor leading a congregation in prayer within the confines of a church in central Nigeria. Suddenly, the peaceful ambiance shatters as the deafening sound of gunshots echoes through the building, sending worshippers scrambling for their lives. Within moments, gunmen storm the church. Official reports later confirmed that at least 2 lives were lost in the chaos, while others were abducted, vanishing into the night. This episode is not just an isolated event but part of a grim narrative that has come to define the reality for Christians in Nigeria. Nigeria, a country rich in beauty, culture, and history, has also become synonymous with violence, a violence often overlooked by the rest of the world. Across the nation, communities have endured a ceaseless barrage of attacks, civil wars, ethnic conflicts, and insurgencies, creating a legacy of suffering and despair. For generations, the inhospitable environment has become a breeding ground for extremists, and a harrowing pattern emerges particularly as we focus our attention on Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation and an economic titan in the West African region with a population nearing 230 million. For centuries, Christians and Muslims coexisted in relative peace within Nigeria. However, the last decade has seen the country transformed into one of the deadliest places for Christians on earth. Entire villages have been annihilated during midnight raids. Churches have been reduced to ash. Pastors have been executed, and families have been obliterated, all victims of groups that proudly identify themselves as Islamist militants. Asterisk the actors of violence, a timeline of terror asterisk. The violence targeting Christians in Nigeria has escalated alarmingly, underpinned by groups such as Boko Haram, the Islamic State West Africa Province, ISWAP, and heavily armed Fulani extremist factions. Each of these organizations systematically targets Christian communities with increasing brutality. But why has this wave of violence metastasized, and why does it largely go unnoticed by Western media? When we dissect the landscape of violence in Nigeria, 3 names persistently arise: Boko Haram, ISW, and the Fulani militants. Asterisk Boko Haram. The origins of a terror movement asterisk Boko Haram, whose name translates to Western education is forbiddance, began in 2002 as a religious sect founded by Muhammad Yusuf. Yusuf promoted a separatist message that denounced Western culture, schools, and the Nigerian government, which he deemed the corruption of true Islamic values. His sermons attracted thousands of impressionable young men in northeastern Nigeria, who felt abandoned by their society riddled with poverty and corruption. However, the turning point came in 2009 when Yusuf was captured and executed under dubious circumstances. His death ignited a radical transformation within the movement, which pivoted from advocating for religious reform to engaging in a campaign of terror. Under the leadership of Abubakar Shakal, Boko Haram unleashed a reign of terror targeting Christian communities, bombing churches during services, kidnapping girls, and executing pastors. Their agenda was not merely violent. It was a calculated effort to instill fear, eliminate Christian influence, and establish a non-Western Islamic state. Boko Haram views Christians as not just another demographic, but as the embodiment of everything they oppose. By targeting churches, schools, and Christian communities, they believe they are striking at the heart of Western civilization, what they perceive to be the corrupting influence of the West. Asterisk ISWAP, a new facet of terrorism asterisk in 2016. Boko Haram splintered into factions due to internal strife and frustration from the Islamic State leadership. This fragmentation gave birth to the Islamic State West Africa Province, ISWAP. Under the new leadership of Abu Musab al-Barnawi, the group adopted a more structured and strategic approach, setting themselves apart from Shakal's more chaotic and violent faction. ISWAP is characterized by a mix of brutal violence and attempts to govern. They do not only raid villages but also seek to impose Islamic law. Their methods include establishing taxes, setting up Sharia courts, and recruiting locals to expand their military capabilities. Moreover, IS become notorious for executing Christians in graphic displays reminiscent of the atrocities committed by ISIS in other regions. One of the horrifying legacies of Boko Haram has been revived by ISWAP, the mass abduction of young girls. In late November 2025, for instance, 13 teenage girls from the Musa district were taken, forced into marriages or servitude, echoing the traumatic Chibok school kidnapping incident. Asterisk Fulani militant factions, a different kind of terror asterisk. Aside from organized Islamist groups, violence spills into the rural territories at the hands of the Fulani militants, heavily armed factions drawn from a traditionally pastoralist ethnic group. While the majority of Fulani people lead peaceful lives, extremist factions within their ranks have emerged as one of the deadliest forces reshaping Nigeria's rural landscape, focusing their violent campaigns primarily on Christian farming communities. The backdrop to these conflicts involves a patchwork of farmlands and grazing routes exacerbated by desertification. As herders are pushed southward, conflict arises over diminishing resources. This dynamic enables extremist elements to frame these agricultural conflicts as religious struggles, characterizing Christian farmers as obstacles that must be eliminated. The raiding methods employed by these Fulani extremists are chillingly methodical. They often strike under the cover of darkness surrounding Christian villages before burning churches and homes to the ground. In these ruthless assaults, militants shoot villagers as they flee burning buildings, with the attack concluding before dawn. Such tactics are deadly effective, driven by the militants' ability to operate freely and unchallenged due to minimal police presence in many rural areas. Asterisk minimization and denial. The Nigerian government's response asterisk. Despite the frequent and appalling nature of these attacks, the Nigerian government shows a troubling tendency to downplay or mischaracterize the violence. Instances of gunfire, village raids, and abductions are often described using vague terms such as local tensions or farmer-herder disputes. This approach effectively obscures the fact that Christian communities are enduring systematic persecution. Nigerian leaders, including President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, have faced criticism for their lack of a decisive response to the escalating violence. While evidence mounts regarding attacks and the plight of the affected communities, the government often opts for denial. They ignore religious dimensions, opting instead to depict the violence as random or politically motivated, making it palatable for specific demographics within the country. The political nuance required to govern. Nigeria, nearly equally divided between Christians and Muslims, adds layers of complexity to the government's hesitancy to confront the truth. Officials recognize that admitting targeted violence against one religion could ignite sectarian strife that threatens to unravel the country's fragile social fabric. This reluctance is reinforced by the reality that regional political coalitions often hinge on relationships with influential Muslim leaders. Publicly condemning extremist violence, even when warranted, risks alienating key political bases that are essential for maintaining power. Furthermore, Nigeria's military and law enforcement agencies face overwhelming challenges, including chronic underfunding, outdated equipment, low morale, and widespread corruption. Local law enforcement officers are often under-resourced and may turn a blind eye to the violence, resulting in unaccountability and enabling the persistence of militant attacks. Asterisk international inaction and humanitarian crisis asterisk. The international community's response to the Nigerian crisis has also been disconcertingly muted. Although various human rights organizations and advocates have sounded alarms about the persecution of Christians, the narrative frequently becomes obscured amidst geopolitical complexities. A U.S. State Department designation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern for its religious violence has drawn limited outcomes beyond recognition. While some congressional delegations have visited the region to assess the humanitarian situation firsthand, concrete actions to address the crisis remain vague and ineffective. The tragic irony is that as the world continues to overlook or downplay the scale of the crisis in Nigeria, thousands of innocent lives are lost. Families are shattered and entire communities are eradicated. In 2025 alone, estimates indicate that over 8,000 Christians were killed. Scores of abductions captured national headlines, and more than 19,000 churches were burned down. Communities that once thrived now exist only as haunting memories echoed in the cries of survivors, left to navigate a landscape reshaped by violence and despair. Asterisk conclusion, a call for global awareness and action asterisk. As the international community continues to grapple with addressing the crisis in Nigeria, It is essential to recognize that the situation warrants immediate and sustained attention. It is no longer a question of political ramifications or regional stability. It is a moral imperative to confront the unfolding humanitarian disaster that threatens the very existence of Christian communities. The plight of Nigeria's Christians cannot be relegated to the sidelines of global discourse. Their stories must be championed and amplified, ensuring that their voices resonate far beyond their beleaguered communities. It is imperative that advocates for human rights, NGOs, and concerned citizens come together to demand accountability, safety, and protection for those facing persecution. A call to action is needed, one that emphasizes solidarity with those suffering and pushes for policies that will provide meaningful assistance and protection. Together we can raise awareness, elevate their stories, and confront the apathy that has allowed this crisis to continue unchecked. In a world that often turns a blind eye to suffering, Nigeria's Christians must not be forgotten. Understanding their struggle and fighting for justice is imperative, not only for their future but for the principles of human rights and religious freedom globally. It is time we stand with them and work diligently toward a future where their faith is celebrated, not threatened, and where violence gives way to peace and healing.